like a treat. We've been talking about doing this for a little while now, and so here we are. Today's the day.
Today is the day. Today is the day. My cat will be making a cameo every once in a while. She just got
Yeah.
spayed and she's back to normal, so she's got a
So
lot of
tearing it
energy to
up.
release. Yep, yep.
I love watching your cats in the background. I actually thought about getting mine to like do a little cameo as well, but I closed the door, so we'll have to see about that. But I'll enjoy the view of yours for sure.
Perfect, perfect.
Awesome.
Um,
Well, this is like you were born to do this. Look at your mic. I'm very jealous. I got nothing but these earbuds, but we're gonna go for it.
yeah, yeah. I spent a little money on this one just because I like having a good voice when talking to clients. Yeah.
Super professional. Yeah, I love it. Well, why don't we just kind of get started where I usually like to start, which is to give the folks joining a little bit of an idea of how you got into design, what your career path was like. A lot of people who want to get into responsible tech or tech in general, just
Mm.
often interested in hearing other people's career paths. So I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about what that's been like for you.
Yeah, yeah. Mine was kind of funny. I like to say that it was a lot of accidents, happy accidents that have happened to get me here. So for undergrad, I went to Virginia Tech. I'm originally from Jersey and didn't know anyone that was going to be going to Virginia Tech, but I knew that they had a great architecture program. They were great in engineering, and back when I was in high school, I wanted to be an architect, and so I thought might as well just go there, try to see if I could get to the architecture program. If not, default down to civil engineering. So back then it was a lot of like math, science, but there was always the lineage of creativity kind of in my childhood. And so when I went to school, started just general studies, and about like I think my second year at Virginia Tech, I tried to get into architecture by signing up for the summer classes and didn't talk to my, professors or any kind of like guidance counselor. I was just like, you know what? I think I know what I'm doing. Um, Signed up for these summer classes. On the first day I get there, my professor, who I still keep in touch with, Professor Hand, hands out a sheet and basically says like, okay, which major are you going for? Is it going to be studio art, graphic design, or art history? And I was like, oh, where's architecture? Because I'm going to be an architecture major. And she goes, you signed up for the wrong classes. That's a different
Hmm.
class. You're going to have to wait another year if you want to do architecture.
Whoops.
And so I checked off the box for graphic design, and that's how I became a graphic designer
You're
in college.
kidding. Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
story. That truly is like
yeah.
a happy accident. It's like the
Very much
definition of
so. Very much so.
wow.
So since then, took the summer classes. And then it was about 4 straight years of just graphic design at Virginia Tech. Back then, we called it visual communication design, which I still think is probably a better term than just
Mm,
graphic design because it does put the idea of communicating, which is, a big part of design, is being able to tell the story of your actual visuals. So I really like that terminology, but graphic design is better for SEO. So I
mm,
kind of get
mm.
that. But then after graduation, did a little bit of networking, and I was able to get a job at the Martin Agency, which is based in Richmond, Virginia. One of their big clients is Geico. I think a lot of people will probably know that one. But I did about 2.5 years of doing online banner ads. So
Hmm.
they call it online advertising, getting into the digital space, learning about how different that is than print, working with a lot of different brands at a single time. And back then we did everything in Photoshop, everything for websites, everything for the banner ads, everything for just like any kind of print was either Illustrator or Photoshop. And so never worked in Sketch, never worked in Figma.
Hmm.
And about the end of that run, I moved over to CarMax, where someone basically took a chance on me for joining a design system team. Never heard about design systems, never built my own brand really. And I was at CarMax for 3.5 years, and there is where I really kind of flourished in the product design world. So learning about design systems, foundational aspects like typography, colors, components such as like buttons, pickers, all that kind of stuff. And that's where I dipped my toe into accessibility.
Hmm.
Um, At Martin, it was kind of talked about, towards the end of my run, but at CarMax is really where it was put at the forefront of everything that we were doing with the design system team. So making sure that, it's not really just, accessible colors, but typography as well. And then when it comes to the actual components is a lot on the dev side, making sure that the code is accessible.
Mm.
That was a big thing that I learned, like in my head, it's probably not totally correct, but like 80 to 90% of accessibility comes from the dev side, but that other 10% is on the design side. So CarMax is really where it helped me learn about the design systems and accessibility, and then moved over to Willow Tree with you. And so that's where, taking all that knowledge and applying it to the agency world. So moving from in-house to agency, it's a bit of a not like a shock per se, but you do have to think differently. You have to move differently. You have to realize, these projects are going to be moving a lot faster, and so the nuance and the craft might have to take a backseat to the timeline. So, luckily, knowing a lot or learning a lot from CarMax I was able to kind of take all that information, hit the ground running at Willow Tree, and since September, I've just kind of been on my own, floating around, doing some freelance. So that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
trajectory of my career. It's a college agency, in-house agency, freelance. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And there's a little thread there I just want to pick on just for folks to maybe think about a little bit, particularly those in leadership positions or hiring positions. I know that the market is just crazy right now. I don't get it. I don't have great advice. But one of the things you said about working for CarMax is that someone took a chance on you. You were doing banner ads and you went into product design and you really flourished in that space. You contributed to their brand and the accessibility of their brand in lots of really meaningful ways. And so I just hope people hear like taking a chance on people who have the talent and the passion. That's really important.
Yeah, yeah. The networking aspect it's probably the most important thing that I've learned in my career is that like every almost like every single job I've gotten is because of the network. If you want, I can tell like a very small, like a short story about how I
Yeah,
got my
do
very
it.
first internship.
Cool.
I had met a friend back in college. His name is Malith. Still friends. I'm actually officiating his wedding. He worked at a bar in Blacksburg called the Cellar. He was the doorman at the Cellar. We became friends. And he was like, "Hey, do you want my job? I'm going to become a server at the Cellar." And I'm like, "Cool. Never been a doorman before. Responsibilities are bouncing people out. And back then, I was maybe like 130 pounds,
I
no
was gonna
muscle,
say,
anything like that. Yeah, no, no, no one saw it. Um, but back then, I was still in school for graphic design, and those nights are stressful. Like when you have a project
Mm,
due, like you're up until about 4 a.m. sometimes, and so when I'd be working, the first couple hours are pretty slow. It doesn't really pick up until about like 10 p.m. We close down around like 2 a.m. And so I'd have my sketchbook on me when I'm manning the door. And so I have my little stool and I have my sketchbook out. And one of the regulars, name was her name was Gabby. One time she saw me sketching and she comes up to me and she's like, "Can I see your notebook?" And I'm just like, "Oh, okay." And so I hand her my notebook. I know she's maybe like 2, 3 years above me in the graphic design program. She like flips through a couple pages and she's like, wrote down her phone number and said like, "Hey, if you want the intern like this internship, let me know." And that's how I
you
got
know
like my
you're
first
being
internship.
oh my
So
gosh, you were
yeah,
interviewed as a doorman and
yeah,
just out of the
yeah,
blue.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fascinating. That's a
So
great story for folks
yeah,
to, yeah, anchor
yeah.
on.
That's what I mean by
Cool.
like a lot of happy accidents got me to where I am. So I'm always like kind of grateful for like those moments. But yeah, a lot of it is just seizing the opportunity that comes down to you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of happy accidents, that's a good transition to you referenced our time together at Willow Tree, which is where we met, and wanted to ask a little bit about your experiences there because we bonded over a particular philosophy around product development. I, as a researcher, you as a designer, kind of coming from different places, but really landing on the same thing, which was really the importance of discovery work, of user centered
Mm,
design, whatever you want to call it, but really inviting users' perspectives into the design process. And that's something I know you're super passionate about, and that was obviously something we could immediately talk about and lean into. But I don't know that all designers really recognize the
Mm.
importance of that. Many do, but I wonder if you could say from your point of view why that just is something that you are really adamant about in your work.
Yeah, yeah. Let me try to think of like what's a good analogy. I like cooking, and cooking's like a passion of mine. The way that I make my scrambled eggs in the morning might not be everyone's kind of like cup of tea, and so I can say, for myself, the way that I like to make my eggs, I like it. But if I were to serve it to 30 people, they might not. And so there's a big importance of not just looking at yourself and who you are, as a designer, as like a cook, a chef, but getting other people's opinions on it so that it can make you better as a designer, or in this analogy, like as a chef. Like if someone says like, "Hey, there's a lot of eggshells in these scrambled eggs," and I'm like, "Yeah, like when I'm making it, kind of loose with it." um, Not exactly, looking at every kind of shell that, might fall in there. But, when it comes down to like, yeah, if you're serving people at like a banquet or something, you better not have any eggshells in there. So I like to think of it like design is, very similar, where it's like I can create, beautiful designs that I think are great. Um, and like they might even be using best practice, which is a term I use very very loosely because it's changing all the time. But when it comes down to it, is that like you are probably not the one that's going to be using this product or using this tool. 90% of the time it's going to be users that might not have a design eye, or might not understand the very like nuances of like why XYZ is the way it is. And so you need to do discovery and user testing to know if your designs are right or wrong for the given platform, for the given tool, or for the given audience. That's my biggest thing, is just like it is it's so hard to go back to a world where like you don't do user testing when you have started doing it and you realized I've been making a lot of mistakes this whole time.
Mhm, mhm,
Um, College, like it'll give you good foundational aspects of like graphic design, but when it comes to product design, it is so important to be testing your designs, because people are not going to totally understand your design decisions, because you don't get the opportunity to give them a slideshow, like you do with stakeholders. You don't get the opportunity to see it get built with your developers. These people are landing on this page for the first time, and they got to know how to use these things, like from the get go, or they're going to bounce out. And the best way to mitigate that risk is by doing that user testing, by doing that discovery work. Like it became a favorite time of mine to launch a user test on usertesting.com, see the test come in, and then after 5 p.m. pour myself a glass of wine on that couch, and then just start watching the videos and be like, tear my design apart. Please tear my design
yeah.
apart. And
Yeah.
I remember just like, you get like half of them are just like they're too nice about it, and I'm
Mm,
just like, I don't want that anymore. I don't want that
mhm,
as a designer anymore. I want you to hate the design, tell me what's bad about it so I can fix it and make it better. And then there's like 5% where these are like stand-up comedians that are just cracking me up, tearing my like design apart, and I'm just like, thank you, because like it's it's not like your peers are going to give you feedback, but it's always going to be like through the lens of like like I might be working with this person, I might be sitting next to them day in day out, or I might be biased because I'm also a designer, and these are usually just like strangers that either don't like aren't in design, aren't in development, or don't know the product. Like those are the best ones. As soon as
mhm.
like someone let's talk about like CarMax. If someone says like, "Oh, CarMax," like I've used the CarMax website before, I usually just like I tune out, and I'm just like, dang it, like I don't want a biased person. I want someone that is like fresh, has never seen or used the website before, because those ones are the ones that like really get down to like the nitty gritty of just like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. I have no idea what to click. Why is that there? Like those are the best kind of like feedback that you can get, because it's raw. It's, like very matter of fact. And it's just like, okay, cool. I need to take another look at my design. So that's why I'm really passionate about like the user testing, the research. I know like that's how we like initially connected on things where it's just like we need that to create better designers. And like for agency, like it might rely on the client willing to spend that money, but for me I was like, there's got to be another way to get that kind of research into everyone's hands. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, for sure. It takes a degree of humility, I would say, to have the courage to put your work out there for that kind of critique. But particularly in product design, I find, this is not our design or our product. It is really
Hmm.
for the user's product. So regardless of what we think about our scrambled eggs, it's
Yep.
not up to
Yep.
us. Never fail to learn something when doing user testing that you just never were even aware of, which I think is the beauty of it. Also, to kind of build on your egg and food metaphor, because now I'm going to use that. One thing I found working with clients too, it's like maybe you're making scrambled eggs, but really the market is looking for an omelet or French toast,
Hmm.
even or something. Like you could totally be missing product market fit if you don't do some of that early discovery. And then, as you're talking about, the more evaluative, like tweaking as you go. It's like, why waste all that time and money when you can just talk to people? It's like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is also a segue into speaking of people and really the diversity of abilities that those people have. And we all, I when I worked in digital accessibility for a university, we would talk about we're all
Mhm.
temporarily abled. Like, you might fall down a flight of stairs and break your arm. You might, gosh, eyesight changes over
Oh
time.
yeah.
There's all kinds of,
Oh yeah.
reasons that don't need justification for just designing with accommodating a spectrum of abilities. And I know that's something I have learned so much from you, particularly in recent months, but in general, that this is something that you really do care about. And I wonder, again, like where that comes from and how you see the design landscape in terms of how it supports or doesn't support usability well. Just curious your thoughts and observations.
Yeah, yeah. Accessibility is it's tough for design. I'm not gonna lie. Like when you're in school, like a lot of it is around just like creating like beautiful, like artistic design. And so back when I was in school, like a lot of the focus was on like print media, so packaging design, posters, logos, and brands. And so you're not really thinking digital first per se. You're really thinking about the output first. Where it's just like, is that a beautiful logo? Does that inspire me to like click on something or like get involved with something? When it comes to packaging, it comes to like, do I want to buy that product? Based on how it looks. Wines really popped off in like the past like decade, where like there used to be almost like a formula for like how to design a wine label and a wine bottle, and now it's so crazy, it's beautiful.
Mm.
And so with the digital world, we do have accessibilities, which means like we do have laws that we have to adhere to. um, the biggest uphill battle when it comes to accessibility is that like designers are not impacted by the end result of bad accessibility. And I feel like that's where we can have like a certain amount of empathy, but like we are able to do our jobs because like 9 times out of 10 we don't have deficiencies of like our eyesight. I'll speak kind of like generally, but the designers I've worked with in past have very like good eyesight, and so they'll be like, oh, I can read it, like, but it you're telling me it fails accessibility, but I can read it perfectly fine. And I'm just like, it's not about you. It's about,
Mhm.
like the 70-year-old that's, trying to buy this product for the first time. And so it's tough to you can learn about accessibility and learn the rules, but it's gonna be kind of like a hard hurdle when like it doesn't affect you. And so like I've had now two developers that are colorblind, and like those are like perfect for me because I'm just like, you have something I don't have, which is something I'm looking for, which is just like making sure that my designs work. If there is no color pulled from it, which is a perfect like barometer for the color contrast that designers have to adhere to. Um, and for design, like a big thing is just like we do think about it's type size and color contrast, and like those are like the two things that really only get talked about when it comes to accessibility. Other things will get like kind of like thrown into like the usability of just like, oh well, like that's hidden behind a click, and like maybe it's kind of seen as accessibility, but it's more seen as usability. And so going back to what I was saying about like the 80-90% of accessibility is on the development side, is like because we're only responsible for like that 10%, it's really hard for us to put accessibility, like really, really at the forefront, because we think, like it's colors and it's typography. Um, and part of it kind of is for design. Like that's really
Mhm.
it is kind of tough, where it's just like, well, my responsibility for accessibility is making sure I never use, you know, type sizes that are under 12 pixels. It's making sure that if I'm, designing an app, that, when I scale the text all the way up to, like 2x or 200%, that the design doesn't break. Like that's where like my responsibility, in theory kind of ends. But, we could be doing a lot more of just like talking to developers about just like, hey, is a keyboard accessible? What's the focus states? A lot of the times that we forget about, like the actual focus state in our designs. And so we default to like the browser default, which
Mhm.
sometimes that actually doesn't even work. And so like you have to be really like in the weeds sometime with like how your product is getting built in order to like understand accessibility. And the tough part, I'm gonna pick on agency for a second, is like the tough part is that like if we get accessibility wrong, it's not really like on us. Like if it gets launched to like a website, that company gets sued. We don't get sued. Versus like if you are in-house and like you are now responsible. Like you
Mhm.
do have to make
Mhm.
sure that you do have like accessible designs. But even so, it's really kind of like a report card, where it's just like, okay, like you get sued, you have a year to fix it, probably take a little bit of a fine, but at the end of the day, as a designer, it's like it's not coming out of my salary, like it's not, my team that is getting the fine. And so it's really hard to kind of like empathize with all of the rules of accessibility, because we don't see the actual repercussions down the line. Like
Mm.
we will have our design leaders and our development leaders when you're in house be like, we need to make sure that like, we're testing for accessibility. And we're not really, saying the words, it's like, oh, we need to be like designing with accessibility, because again, our responsibility is color and type. And so like that's where like it does get pretty hard, to like understand like how could we make the designers like focused on accessibility when our responsibilities are pretty small when it comes
Mm.
down to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up things though, like focus state, for example. It's over because a number of designers who are also well trained in usability and UX design, I think can be a good, I don't know, flag raiser for
Hmm.
developers to say, hey, like this tab, navigation isn't really like working well. Like there's some basic things that we can help from a front end perspective if we have this awareness, maybe beyond the fonts and colors, to those
Hmm.
usability considerations that I found can be helpful. So it might expand our area of impact a little bit.
Hmm.
But I think your point's well taken that the impacts of this were a bit further removed. So this might be a good place to ask you this question, which I ask of everybody, which is, what does responsible tech mean to you?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Yeah. So I've been using Cursor, which is like a vibe coding product, for the past couple of weeks.
Never heard of it.
Um, yeah, it's man, and I think with config, just this week they're talking about Figma Make, which is a product that they're launching, which also does like vibe coding. Um, okay, so let me talk about like, all right, responsible tech without the idea of like AI, without any kind of like recency bias. Like responsible tech to me is just like you gotta take into account, the edge cases. I feel like that's
Mm,
probably like the most blanket way to say it, is just like, you got to accommodate that because it's the right thing to do. Even though like, like, hey, if those users are, like 0.0% of your sales, responsible tech is still like, well, you're just not forgetting about them. Like you still need some kind of solution to support that. Not going to say who this person is, but like when we first started talking about accessibility at CarMax, someone actually just said outspoken, just like, blind people don't drive. Why are we designing for this? And I was like,
Wow.
you missed the point.
Yikes.
And yeah, and so like, the point is that, like, these are people. And these are people that are, like, they're, just because, they're not hitting the buy button, or, like, they're not doing the actions that you want, doesn't, make them, less of a person that can discount. And so responsible tech to me is just like, look, we got to account for all these edge cases because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah,
Like, you might have good eyesight now, doesn't mean you're going to have, good eyesight 20, 30 years from now.
that's right.
And so, like, that's something that I think about a lot, where it's just like, my right eye, like, that one's kind of like going. And so I'm just like, all right, like, got to accommodate that, got to figure that one out. Well, if someone back in the day said like, well, we're not going to help you, like, then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm out of luck then. So
Yeah.
you might as well do it for digital design as well, where it's just like, okay, even like arthritis is like something that is gonna like pop up every now and
Mhm.
then. And so that's why, like, the speech recognition stuff is like, I love that stuff. Like, I use like the voice to text like translation stuff. I don't do voice memos. Don't love that.
Yeah.
Like, because they didn't have like the transcript, but now I think nowadays they do have transcript. But I do like to do like the voice to text like every once in a while, especially if I am like, busy doing something I don't feel like texting, or if I have like a long kind of thing to write. But like, I still have good hands. But I have a cousin, that has arthritis, and she's like, I can't type for like more than like 5 minutes at a time. I got to take a break. And so, like, yeah, it's really helpful to have like the voice recognition stuff. And I'm just like, we didn't even, it became a thing, but we really didn't even think about the fact that, like, that's an accessibility thing.
Mm,
That's
mhm.
something that like someone designed because they were just like, well, maybe people don't have, like, all their fingers. Maybe people aren't able to type as fast as, the younger generations. Like, even I'm slowing down with texting now. I'm like, I'm literally doing the index finger like typing sometimes. I'm like,
Yeah,
and I'm just
well,
like, I'm becoming my parents. And
yeah.
so it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't think about it as you're building the products, like, you're doing yourself a disservice. And, like, you might even become like a victim of like your own bad design years down the road,
Yeah.
where you're just like, crap, I should
Oh,
have
that's
I
an
should have
interesting
designed this
point.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's not like no judgment. I mean, people, like I say, like, people are people, and like we should be
Oh yeah.
designing it. And if the doing the right thing isn't compelling, certainly like thinking about your addressable market should be compelling. I mean, people of all levels of vision buy cars. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like for
Yeah.
example, that's just ridiculous. So thank you for that. I think that's a really nice definition. And I do want to follow up on your cursor comment because we've exchanged a few messages about config, which I have to catch up on what's
Hmm.
been going on there. But I know you had a take or two, and I definitely want to leave time for what I think that listeners, viewers are going to be like so thrilled to see, which is your color explanation. So I do want to leave time for that. But cursor, like, tell me your hot takes.
Yeah. Hot take. All right. So, oh, I think it's fine. It's fine.
All right,
Um,
that
I
wasn't as
think it's
spicy.
gonna. No, no. Like, so here's my take. Is like, I think AI vibe coding has a place in the design world, where if you can use the tools to build other tools to help you become a better designer, I'm all for it. That's where,
Mm,
like, I'm a okay with like AI, if it's just like honing design skills, where it's like saying like, hey, like, we built a tool that can help you um like, identify better white space, like, in your designs. Like, hey, like, we've noticed that like your designs are a little bit cramped. Here's a recommendation of like, how to build a better design. I like that. I like it when it's like helping you learn, kind of a thing. I don't like it when it's like, here's the answer, because that takes away a huge aspect of design, which is making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. um but that's why, like, anytime I talk about my career, like, I make sure to focus on like the fact of like, I got to where I am because of all the mistakes that I made. Was it a good idea to work at a bar in college when I'm 120 pounds and I had to bounce people out? Probably not. Good mistake. Definitely learned a
Mm.
lot working at a bar. Should I have talked to my guidance counselor before, making the jump to architecture classes? Definitely should have. That was a mistake. Um, just like all those little things will help you learn and like hone your skills as a designer. And so if AI is just like, giving you the answers and you're not learning the why behind it, or you're not learning like, this design decision is better because of XYZ, that's where we're missing out. That's where we're like losing out. And that's where like you can kind of over time tell when something is being like built with AI is like there aren't human errors that are like part of that design, or like human tweaks that come in there. Something that I kind of like to talk about that is like it's so small but like it's so like human is like the pull to refresh on your phone.
Mhm.
That like no, like that was never like a design standard. It was just like someone was just like, can we just make this thing where it's just like I just pull it down and it just refreshes? Guarantee that was probably just like during a QA thing where someone's just like,
Huh,
I'm tired of hitting the refresh button on my phone. Can I just do
interesting.
like a thing where like I just pull the refresh, and they're like, cool. And now it's an industry standard of just like pull the
Mm,
refresh. Like that was like not a thing, and then all of a sudden it became a thing, and it was like now it's like ubiquitous of just like
mm,
pull the refresh. And so like those like little moments of just like ingenuity, like AI is not gonna be able to come up with that kind of stuff. And so if AI is there, and you're using it to just get an answer and like give you an answer, but you're not understanding like the actual problem, then you're always just going to be surface level. Like it's always just going to be like, okay, well, I found a solution. I found a solution. But again, let's go back to user testing is like, if you're not actually testing it with users, you don't know if that's really a solution. If you're just relying on
yeah,
AI
yeah.
to give you the solution, but you're not actually testing it, then you're giving a false sense of security to designers where they're just like, well, I created it, the clients approved it or the stakeholders approved it, and it's launched, which means it's correct. That's the worst thing you can do as a designer is like assume that you are correct
Yeah.
without actually seeing metrics, without actually seeing users use it. Like at CarMax, I think we use like the mom test. It's like someone give your phone to like your mom, see if like they can use like what you're building, because that's a great test where it's just like they're probably a generation above you, and if your mom can use it, perfect. But if you're just handing it off to another designer and be like, can you use this, it's not a good barometer.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where like AI, where it's just like, if I can use the tool to build other tools to make me a better designer, cool, I'm all for it. But let's get back to actually like Cursor as like a product. It is vibe coding, which means like 90% of my time building this tool that I'm gonna demo is bugs. It is the choppiest code. It is not
Mm,
great. It is inaccessible code. You're going to see a lot of hot takes coming in from config,
mm,
about like the code that Figma Make is building, or like the code that Cursor is building. I know for a fact, I've showed this like to a developer and they're just like can't really read it, don't really know what's
mhm.
going on, and I'm just like fair. So like it can be used for like small things, but like I can never imagine using Cursor to build, a website that is more than 5 pages, because even though you tell it like, hey, when you build this, don't touch other stuff, like don't break other stuff, it'll break other stuff. It'll just
Yeah.
break other stuff. And I'm just like, okay, so this is not responsible. This is not
Mm,
like you can't rely on this thing to be creating accessible code, good DOM structures, clean code. And you can't even rely on it to build accessible designs. Like you
yeah.
can say it's like make sure it's accessible, and it's like, I'll try. And I'm just like, okay. And so um this is pure user error. This is my fault. I will take 100% responsibility for it. But when I first started on this project with Cursor, I just said like, okay, like start project, and it just started building in my documents folder. And so like as like I'm building this tool using Cursor, I'm just like, okay, now do like a clean install on like my GitHub. And it's like, okay, clean install. I'm gonna wipe everything in this folder and then rebuild it. And I'm
Oh,
just like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, my Finder on like my other screen, all of a sudden I just see my files disappearing. And so it
oh,
deleted everything in my documents folder. And then that is
gosh.
work like
No.
from like the past, like, yeah, like multiple years of like work. And I'm just like, no,
Wow.
no,
Undo.
like wait, yeah. And it was like, can't undo it. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh, I didn't know
"Did
that
you
that
move it to the
happened to
trash?"
you.
And they're like, "No, we deleted the metadata as well." And I'm just like, that seems like a
Whoa.
glaring, like issue that I'm sure if I did like a developer like with me and be like, okay, yeah, don't do what you just did and like don't start in like your folder, like start in like sub folder so it doesn't have access to that. I'm just a designer. I didn't know that. And
That's
so
a
it's like
yeah,
that's
tough lesson,
responsible
a
tech.
mistake. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
thinking of the edge cases, exactly that.
Exactly. Exactly. Where it's just like I consider myself like a decently smart person and that was
Mm,
just a huge setback of just like it literally took like one of my friends Zach getting me on the phone and to be like just keep moving forward and I'm just like tight, okay,
oh my
yep, I can
gosh.
do that. So yeah, I got back onto Cursor the next day, figured out how to make sure that that never happens again. But yeah, no,
Mm,
it's a big learning lesson and that is one of those things where it's just like I get it. I can definitely see the benefit of vibe coding, but it's never going to be able to replace, like really, really like nuanced code or again, those like sparks of like ingenuity, like the pull to refresh. Like it's not going to be able to like do that kind of stuff. And so like for me, that's my goal is just like if I can use AI to force it to like, like build better tools for designers, like learning about accessibility or, like creating just better designs overall, where it's just like, okay, hey, like here's our recommendation for like better hierarchy. Like, cool, love that as long as it tells the designer why, like it's recommending these things rather than just doing it.
mm,
Like I don't have kids, but I'm guessing, like as a parent, like probably the worst thing that you can do for your kid is do everything for your kid. You
mm,
need that child to like learn, to make mistakes, like you can tell it, like, hey, don't touch the fire on the stove, don't touch it. But until they touch it and they realize, ouch, that hurts, they're not really gonna like fully like learn from it. And so that's where I think it's important to be using AI as a tool to maybe build other tools or as a learning tool, but for it to do the work and like replace, no, I
yeah,
I
and
I, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't want it to ever do that. Yeah.
well, and to your point, I think as a researcher, one of the things that concerns me is this notion of one right answer. Like you say, if it's just giving you the answer, it just implies that there is one right answer. And in design, that's just
Hmm.
not true. I don't think ever.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
speaking of Zach, I would be remiss if I didn't say hi because Zach is joining us and he says, keep
Hi,
me
Zach.
moving forward. Sully.
Yeah.
So yeah, so let's do move forward because I really want you to have an opportunity to do a little bit of a presentation of something that you have done as we've worked on projects together. I have had a front row seat to numerous occasions where you have worked with clients to help them understand, I'm going to say, color theory and how it
Mm,
translates to digital and how it translates to accessibility. And I will tell everyone listening, you think you know color, you do not know color. Not the way that Sully knows color. It's like a master class. Like I could
mm,
listen, and I have listened for like hours to you talk about color. It's fascinating every
mm,
time.
mm.
So I want everyone to get a little bit of a taste of that and understand how to think about a palette that is accessible and so forth, and the way that only you can do it. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, it's awesome.
Nice words. Thank you. I'll always say it's like I have expertise in accessible color. I'll never call myself an expert. That's a whole other story about that word.
Okay.
But I
To
like
me,
the I
you
like the
are.
expertise. Oh, thank you. Thank you. But yeah, no, like let's dive into it. And what I'll do is I'll start sharing my screen just so I can do the show don't tell
Mhm.
kind of aspect of it. And one thing that I really like that what you just said was like there is no one right answer. And so this is a tool that I built using AI. A tool I use the tool to build a tool to make me a better designer and to hopefully make other designers better at creating accessible color palettes. Like that is it's such a like we say that word a lot or like say that term a lot and I've actually talked to like a couple other designers like on LinkedIn where it's like I know we throw that word around but like we need to like understand like what does it actually mean. And the best way I can describe it is just like you're doing good groundwork when you are creating a color system so that as it scales up, like as your company gets bigger, maybe like as you add more products, like foundationally, like, okay, our color system is set up to expand and support multiple color families, and they all have like the same underlying structure of accessibility. And really what I mean by that is like a contrast grid. So this is a tool, officially like announcing it today, the color grid tool. You can find it at colorgrid.design. And what it does is it helps you create accessible color palettes, whether either based on your brand or if you're just starting from scratch. And so what I've done is divided up into three ways of kind of using it. It's a simple way, an advanced way, or a very custom way. And so custom would be great, if you already have a brand in place and you want to create a color system based on your brand's color. For us, a good example of that would be, like when I was in advertising, a lot of them will have like this brand book where it's like core color, darker shade, lighter shade, and that's it. And when you're doing digital, it's like you got to account for, again, the focus state, the active state. What if you want like a secondary color, like a tertiary color, even that still relates back to the core color family? So you might need like multiple shades of that. And so, how do you get ahead of that? Is that you create accessible and robust color systems from the get go. Um, we've done this with St. Andrews, where like you take like a single hue and you create a color system out of it. I've even done it for Willow Tree clients, where you take a single hue and you create an entire color system out of it. And so what's the actual underlying structure is these numbers over to the left over here. Just for like the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to call them lightness values. Basically, like every single hue that you work with is going to have lightness values from 0 to 100. But that does mean that you can have correct answers all along the way. That's where something like a palette generator might fall a little bit short. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly show you this hue here. It's nothing really specific. It's just like a blue hue. If I went to something like material design and I typed in that same hue, what I'm going to get is a color palette where that actual hex code is the darkest value there. Is that correct? Could be, might be. It might exactly fit your needs. But, like let's say I just move like that dot like a little bit, it stays in the same place, stays in the same place. But then if I move it up over here, all of a sudden it moves to like the middle. And so it's those little like things where it's like, well, why did it do that? And so this is where I think AI might be helpful, which is like helping you understand like which is correct. And the answer to that is sadly, it's just like it's situational. It's really just going to be like, well, it's really based on like what you need. So if I type in like that same hex code and it moves to the darkest one, it might fit the need. But with this color grid tool, what I really want people to understand is like there is a huge amount of quote unquote correct answers. So what I'm going to do now is filter by those lightness values. And what you see now is that like each of those values has a ramp where it's like any of these could be the correct answer when you're building out a color system. And that's where you, as a designer, need to come into play of just saying, like, okay, well, nuance is going to be needed. Let me just quickly go back here. Like that core dot, that key hex code is all the way over here. So as I'm like filtering by these ramps, like, okay, well, I know that that dot is going to be over there. So maybe as I'm building this color system, well, one, I'm definitely going to need to intersect or at least like be around it. But two, it's like, how am I gonna build this system so it fits, the product that I'm building? Like if I choose, like very high saturation, very high vibrancy, you can get a very modern looking palette. So I'm just going to start creating this palette by clicking on these color swatches here and then selecting a dot in the dot grid and just saying like, okay, like, wow, like I'm getting like these very like vibrant blues, these very like modern looking blues. But then as soon as I go back to like my key hex code, I'm just like, well, that one's actually like more of like over here. And now as I'm looking at like this palette that I'm creating, doesn't really fit in. It's like very like desaturated. So like again, the palette generator is going to take its best like guess at just like, okay, you're over here. here are like some swatches. This one is just material design. I have looked at like a bunch of other palette generators to do like an audit. Shout out to Daniel Choi for basically saying like, hey, here's like some other generators that you might want to look at. And so I tested those ones against this tool. And really, what I'm trying to get at with this tool is to help you create these palettes rather than generate palettes, because this is going to become part of like a teaching tool of like, this has always been in my head for the past I think it's going to be about like 8 years going on now, where it's like anytime I make a color system, these ramps are always like in my brain. um, but I haven't been able to find a tool that helps me basically make this functional and have it so that like other designers can just like quickly see this and see what's inside my brain. And so that's what I like about like the AI, where it's just like if I can create something to help other people learn something that it took me years. Like I'm not gonna lie, that whole like color theory like expertise, it took years of, like really like nuance where it's just like, okay, like that adjustment there, that adjustment there. So if I can create a tool where I can hand it off to other designers to be like, instead of you guys also taking years to have to learn about, hex codes and seeing dots in your dreams, if I could build a tool where you guys can just, go, that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. That's where I think like AI can be helpful. And that's where I see like cursor being like a limited kind of thing where it's just like, okay, maybe it's not production code, but if I'm able to create tools for designers to become better designers, I'm all for it. I'll be on board with that. That's responsible kind of tech to me. Um, but even so, like with this one, like there's like gonna be like a lot of bugs. Like I'm not a developer and I can't explain, like what the code that is written really does. Like I can explain the tool in a way where I'm just like, here's what I'm trying to get at. But if something breaks or all of a sudden like cursor goes away, I'm back at square one. I'm back at like I just have an idea, but I don't know how to create it. And so that's where like I'm kind of like on the fence about these AI vibe coding kind of things where it's like it's great to be able to create something that is in your head and get it like onto like an actual screen for like others to look at, but at the same time it's just like it's not going to be able to, it's not helping me learn React. I'm not a React developer. I'm not learning code. I know a little bit about CSS. I can nudge things to the left, nudge things to the right, but let's just say like I want a button here that does XYZ. It's like you got to write out a lot and then you got to do a lot of mitigation after that where you're just like, nope, wrong. You just broke the entire thing. So after like all my documents got deleted, I had to rebuild this thing like from scratch. And then basically just do like a lot of just like bug fixing all over again. So it's just like it's not a silver bullet, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want designers to become, developers. I want them to have an appreciation for development, because even like something as small as just like being able to like click on this input field and like move it up and down, like I'm sure that takes a lot of like actual code, like, and I had to specify like all of these little things, and I'm just like, now I'm just like, I need a developer. Like, you need
Mhm.
developers, you need designers. This is not going to be a replacement. It's going to be an appreciation for what we do, and so that's where like I might see a big plus is just like learning to appreciate. Man, our developers do a lot for
Yeah.
us, for us
Yeah.
designers. So,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
that was my same feeling watching you talk about color theory and accessibility and just good design, because, and maybe you can share a little bit about this, but I think the nuance, this is where things kind of go from being good to like great.
Mhm.
And I think that you showed a lot of scenarios and cases where colors could fail in different respects to the client. I thought it was really fascinating because you have this very nuanced view in a product paradigm of what jobs colors need to do. So I know this is a huge question, but can you summarize some of the things that perhaps people neglect about color palettes and choices that hamstring them in the future because they didn't think about some of these nuances?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's usually starting too small. the one thing that I wanted to make sure when I'm doing like simple, advanced, and custom is giving everyone the starting recommendation. Like for me, I always go with the advanced route nowadays because I think of design systems not as a warehouse, right? That was kind of like the old school way of thinking of like you just have a bunch of stuff and aka like components, foundational things, and you just have a giant warehouse and whenever you need something you can go into the warehouse and like maybe kind of find it. I've now changed my mentality to like design systems are like a museum where it's like it's very curated. What is shown to the user is very thoughtful and thought out. You're putting things on display for a specific reason. But if you kind of like ask like some of the bigger museums, is like they always have a basement that has like 5 times the amount of stuff that is on display. And so it's not so much like we have a warehouse and everyone has access to the warehouse. It's like I want it to be seen as a museum where like what you see is beautiful, it's well designed, but you always have stuff in the basement. And so with color systems, the number one thing I always hear the first time like I show any like a designer something like this is like, I'm not going to use all those colors. And I'm like, that's fine. You're not supposed to. You don't have to. But you're going to be happy when you do come across a scenario where it's like, I wish I just had something that was in between X and Y. And I'm like, boom, now you get it. Now you get it. So it's going to take, again, like, that toddler touching the fire to be like, I get it now. Now I
Yeah.
understand. And so that's where these kinds of things, like, hopefully it's a learning tool where it's just like, I don't expect you to use every single swatch on day one. It's not going to happen. And I told my boss that back at CarMax when I redesigned like the color scheme. It's like we might find a color usage for like blue 300. It might just be sitting there for a couple of years. Don't know. But then an
Mm.
illustrator came along. They're like, I've used every single one. I'm like, big
No
win.
kidding.
So
Oh my
it's
gosh.
it's one of those things where it's just like you might not find a need for it. You might not see a reason for it in the future, but someone might down the line, and you're going to be happy when it's there in your museum basement that you can go pick it up, put it on display, and be like, we set ourselves up for success from day one using something like this.
Wow. Your metaphors are chef's kiss. And yes, I'm
Oh,
calling back
thank
to
you.
your food metaphor. I mean, that just paints the picture totally for me. So that's awesome. Well, let's see if we have, I know we have people listening in. I wonder if anyone has any questions for Sully on color, design, responsibility, accessibility. But while I let people kind of think on that, Sully, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to hear you, pontificate on color? I mean, what should they do to connect?
LinkedIn probably the best for me right now. My portfolio like is in flux, and so like I really don't even have like a good website to kind of show off. But LinkedIn is probably like my best. Like I love a good LinkedIn message. I actually did reach out to the very first designer that inspired me on this whole color theory, and I showed him, I guess, like the V3 of the color grid tool. His name is Ji Young, and he wrote an article back in like 2017 for like UX Planet, where he did like an analysis of material design and IBM. Put it like an article online, and I was like, I could do that for CarMax, and so reached out to him like earlier this week, and I was like, you don't know me, we've never met, but I just want to say like you've really changed the trajectory of my entire career with that one article.
Wow.
And he was really appreciative, and I'm just like that's those are like those small things that I really like, where it's just like always remember like who's inspired you, and yeah, a LinkedIn message, can make someone's day, can make someone's week, and so yeah, another happy accident of just stumbling upon that article. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's what it's really all about, I think. What's inspiring you these days? Like, what are you thinking about?
Oh gosh. Oh gosh. Trying to inspire myself as much as possible.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where it's just like I gotta look inward to figure out, like what's next on the career path.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of optimism that it's coming from like my friends of just like I gravitate towards that as like inspiration. Like it's people being optimistic of just like, yeah, XYZ is coming down the line, but here's like another take on it. And so
Mm.
big support system has been like really helpful the past couple of weeks. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, speaking of support systems, I know Zach's part of it. There are some questions, and Alex, hi, he's joining as well.
Hey,
So
Alex.
Zach is asking, what do you think the future of the APCA stands in terms of being a good and measurable tool for contrast accessibility, even if YCAG doesn't adopt it?
Okay. APCA, for those that don't know, it's the Accessible Perceptual Contrast or Color Algorithm. Forget if it's contrast or actual color. It basically takes the current state of color contrast to like another level where it takes the text size into account. So as of right now, it's basically just like, all right, as long as it's like 14 pixels and above, it's got to hit this kind of ratio of like 4.5 to 1. So it's got to have like enough contrast. APCA is like it's every single text size has a different ratio. Um,
Mm,
my big spicy take, and I talked to the person that developed the algorithm. I'm just like, I love it as a science nerd. Love what you're doing with it. It is going to be very hard to adopt for
mm,
companies.
mm,
And he himself, like, he doesn't want it to be codified into law. He's like, I just want it to be something that can make accessibility better. He's legally blind, and he created this thing. And so for him to create this, like, one, amazing, incredible. But two, I don't think it can be put at the same standard as like the current algorithm, because the current algorithm is like a very uh what's the nice way to say it? It's just like a very
mm,
rudimentary approach.
mm,
This person like really took it to like the next level of just like, if it's really big text, you're going to be able to perceive it better than if it's
mhm,
very small text. Like, you
mhm,
need higher contrast the smaller the text is. You don't need as much contrast the bigger the text is. And like that nuance, I'm like, I love that. It would get very, very difficult when you have browser text scaling, when you have app text scaling, like your
mm,
phone, like all that kind of text scaling. Like,
mm.
it's going to be so hard to police that kind of thing. And I don't think, the person that created the algorithm wants that kind of policing, but it's more so just like, I just want this to be a thing to help out other people that
Mm,
have, eye deficiencies. And I'm just like, I
gotcha,
love that. I love that. And
gotcha.
so I did like a deep dive into APCA a little while ago. And so I'm just like, if it ever comes like down the line, I know how to like create color systems that can account for it, but you just need to do a lot more work as a designer to
Mm,
understand it. Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. Well, Alex also has a question. What strategy or strategies, plural, have you used or do you suggest for design system adoption?
I thought about this a lot because I was like,
Hmm.
if I were to ever lead a design system team, I think like the first like big presentation I do would be, there'd be a big focus on evangelization and a contribution model. Let's take in-house company as like our big example for design systems. Is that design system teams, I've seen them get like a lot of funding, and then when COVID happened, all the funding gone because
Mm,
they were seen as the expendable team, because they're not generating revenue. They are generating, tools for other designers to use, but because you can't really tie a monetary amount to it easily, they'll be like the first ones on the chopping block. You might be able to talk to like other designers in the industry of just like, hey, what happened to your design system team? And a lot of times people will just be like, yeah, it's gone.
mm,
Or it's like, oh, like we're bringing it back, and I'm just like, so you're starting from square one again, or like maybe like you're able to kind of pick up where you left off, but like it needs to be evangelized and a contribution system needs to be established. And what that means is that other product teams are able to say, like, I would like this in the design system. I'm going to build it, I'm going to design it, and then contribute it back to you.
mm,
Because your design system team will never be as big as the other product teams that it supports combined. Like,
mm.
we had at my time in CarMax, it was like 20 to 30 product teams and one design system team, which meant two
Ah,
designers, two developers. We will never be able to match, the manpower that the other product teams have combined. You need to have a contribution model. You need to have evangelization. So you got to show that it's not so much like, oh, it works. Everyone knows now like design systems work, but does it work for your company? Does it work for the products
Mhm.
that you're trying to build? If you're not adapting and listening to the other product teams that you are supporting, then yeah, your design system team will probably be on the chopping block. So you have to be flexible, which means like you can't be writing rules. One of my mentors, Marissa, always said, "It's like these are not rules; these are guidelines." And I'm
Mm,
just like, and
mm,
it's
mm,
something as a designer on a design system team that you have to humble yourself to be like, yeah, my work is it's a suggestion. Your work
mm,
that you do is a recommendation, it's a suggestion, but you cannot expect the product teams that you are supporting to follow it to a T.
mm,
You
mhm,
have to be flexible. You have to think about the customer because like they have their users, who are the ones like clicking the actual buttons. The designers and developers are our users, so we have to listen to them. Where it's just like, if they don't want CSS and HTML and they only want React, guess what? Go to React. Don't try to push
mhm,
against that wave. Like you got to think about evangelization. You got to think about the contribution model of like if you're building a tool that is either going to make their job harder or they're just like not excited about it, then you're doing something wrong. So like
yeah,
design systems, it is heavy on the communication. That's why
mm,
like I loved it so much, and that's why like I'm so grateful that again, like his name is Vinny. Vinny took a chance on me back at CarMax where he was like, "You don't even know design system. You don't even know atomic design." And I'm like, "I don't know any of this." And took a chance
Look
on me.
at
He's
you
like, "Whatever."
now.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's one of those things where it's like you got to listen to the ones that are actually using your design system because if you
Yeah.
try to force something in, it's not going to work out. Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I think it's a great place to leave it because we've come full circle from like the user testing and all of that, same principles,
yeah.
but really interesting take. So,
Visual communication. It's all
yeah,
about
yeah.
communication. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it is always a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm glad we made it work. I hope people really kind of got a lot of learning today. I know every single time I talk with you, I learned something new. Today was not an exception. So I'm really grateful. And
Thank
we're
you,
going to keep
Jill.
talking. So
Love it.
thanks so much. And yeah, everyone have a great weekend.